Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all of you who have logged in from different parts of the globe today. Welcome to the 10th edition of LOBA Career Guidance Session. On behalf of LOBA and Loyola School, it is my privilege to welcome this audience. A typical question that crops up in the mind of a high schooler is what next after 12th? It's quite natural to be confused. Let's say we sought that in the form of a 3 or a 4-year undergraduate course, arts, commerce, engineering, and then MBA. Ryan, I think you're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So that brings us to our topic for the day, why MBA, a career in management and consulting. My name is Ryan Jacob Mathew, and I'll be your moderator for the day. And I'm from class 12 at Loyola School, Trivandrum. Let me also introduce you to my co-moderator, Abhilash Jayapal. He's a founder at Terrific Minds and also former LOBA Joint Secretary.
I'm glad to be back, and thank you, Ryan. Can I call you RJ? That sounds a lot more cooler.
Okay, so I'll call you AJ.
That's cool.
All right, so let's get started here. We are super excited to introduce you to our amazing panelists. First off, we have Shankar Krishnan from the batch of 1983. He's a former partner at McKinsey and Chief Strategy Advisor for Ramco Group. Then next up, we have Xavier Sebastian from the batch of 1994. He's a former partner at BCG and Chief Strategy Officer at TAFE. And finally, we have Somnath Kishore from the batch of 2014. He's a management consultant at McKinsey.
All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you all for the questions that you have sent to our team. They have been very crucial in designing the session today. So before we move any further, a quick housekeeping guideline. If we could just bring up the housekeeping guideline. It's basically that questions for the panel can be sent in via chat from 7:20 p.m. onwards. And we will be taking the additional questions from the attendees as well. We've already received one set of questions, but we will be taking additional questions during the course of this conversation. All right, so now that we are getting started, let us know a bit about you. Can we have the poll? Binoy, if you could just bring up the poll, that will be really helpful. So we have two polls in the chat section. The first is on who you are so that we understand the audience better. And the second is on your interest in the topic we are discussing today. So kindly select the option most relevant to you and click on submit. We shall wait for 20 seconds. Thank you. So these are the polls. You have the options. Please click what you think is relevant and to submit. We have 10 more seconds. All right. So can we move ahead?
Yeah. So tonight's session is all about exploration and guidance. And in today's world, you will frequently find yourself in very exciting and compelling scenarios. So now let's move on and hear some stories of our panelists and their respective academic and professional journeys.
All right, so let's move on to section 1. Section 1 is called why, when, and how. So let's start with a why question. I'll pick Shankar here. They say seniors first, so I'm going with you, Shankar. So Loyola, CET, IIM, Ahmedabad, why did you choose an MBA and what's your story?
So that's a very good question, AJ. I think, in school, I barely knew what an MBA was, and certainly that's not where I thought I was headed. I was very much someone who liked science fiction, read a lot of works by Asimov or Clarke, and naturally perhaps gravitated to computer science and engineering for my undergraduate, right? For wow, new technology, computers, robots, who knows where the world is headed. As I was going through my undergraduate in computers, though, I did a number of internships, and then I realized that what is more important than the technology itself is how well people actually use it, how well people adopt it, how well it changes their lives. So I did, an internship on computerizing the national games, worked on trying to create Trivandrum's first automated traffic system, and all of these kind of started to convince me that more important than anything else is to look at real world problems. Let me see if I can bring that to life, AJ. Let's take the pandemic that's going on right now, and clearly one of the big solutions is coming up with the right COVID vaccine. Obviously, there's technology involved, the R&D involved there, but even more, we have to make the vaccine affordable to people. So there's a whole question of economics. We have to make the vaccine something that they want to try, given all the fears that's in people's minds. So understanding people's behavior, psychology is another aspect. Getting the vaccine out there, distribution, logistics, that becomes yet another aspect. What I'm trying to say is ultimately, in order to solve the COVID vaccine problem, it's a lot more than just technology. And I think that kind of real world problem solving, looking at multiple